Did George Russell really not see Max Verstappen during his Q3 crash? Was that lap valid? Why did Max Verstappen crash in Q3 in the first place? What happened to Ferrari? Was Barcelona's success a one-off? Verstappen clearly seemed to have gotten a better result than expected. So does that mean Red Bull are back? There is just so many questions, and more than answering a lot of questions, this weekend gave us more questions to ask. So let's talk about all of these questions and their respective answers in this video. This is 2026 Austrian Grand Prix weekend review. Hello everyone, Anderson here. Welcome back to the channel. Like I mentioned in the last video and the reel that I posted on Instagram, Austrian GP is supposed to be a really important weekend, and it truly was. Not the most exciting when it comes to race pace and race moments and wheel-to-wheel battles, but this race was more conceptually important for the big picture of the season and the sport, because we were going to find out the true potential of the upgrades that were brought into the weekend. So I guess with that in mind, we'll go one by one about each team, what upgrades they got and how they managed through the weekend. And I want to start off with the team with the most number of components that were upgraded, Cadillac. If you watched the race, you know that upgraded car of theirs lasted for an entirety of 6 laps. 2 laps from Bottas and 4 laps from Perez. Both their cars were on fire. Literally, the brakes were on fire and they were using fire extinguishers to cool it down. At least they both qualified ahead of the Astons. I guess that is a victory. So yeah, the team is having it rough, but an expected start to a Formula One debut season, I guess. It just goes on to show how difficult it is for a brand new team to enter into Formula One. There will be more races like this till they figure out a rhythm, but I'm happy to see them on the grid. But it was also funny to see how they had the most number of upgrades and they lasted a total of 4 laps before both cars DNF'd. With that interesting team out of the way, let's get to the real stars of the weekend. When I say stars, relatively, we will now focus on Red Bull Racing and how their weekend went. Arguably, this was one of the best weekends for Red Bull Racing in this season, and this was definitely Max's best result in this season. But it wasn't all smooth sailing through the weekend. Actually, it was far from it. See, the upgrades on the car definitely cannot be called upgrades. They just built a brand new car for him. Apart from the engine and some internal components, everything about the chassis, the aero package, wings, all of them were new and modified. And this weekend was either going to go really well for them or they were in big trouble. Glad it went the first direction. They had the second most number of upgrades on the grid, and after the weekend, we can confidently say the upgrades were definitely in the right direction, but it definitely looked a little bit scary and dangerous through the practice sessions. Why? There was a picture of a mechanic with an iPad sitting right under the car, and it looked almost like he was crying lol watching some K-drama or something. The car literally had to be assembled from scratch before the practice sessions, and even in the practice session there were so many problems. The clutch gave problems and the car was stalling again. The only saving grace was the fact that Max was P4 in both FP1 and FP2, so we knew that the car was working and the results could be improved. But again, you never knew till qualifying, and then qualifying came. I will talk about the Q3 controversy when I talk about Mercedes and George, but I do want to talk about Max Verstappen's qualifying overall. And I have to say, Q2 was a little too close for comfort. What were they doing, Red Bull, keeping Max Verstappen in when lap times were tumbling? He barely managed to qualify to Q3 with P10. He was about to be eliminated by Pierre Gasly, and that would have been the start of all the memes about Pierre Gasly being better than Max Verstappen. But yeah, thankfully it did not happen. But I also do understand why Red Bull kept Max Verstappen in the pit. See, if he was supposed to go out, it would mean he needs to do it on a fresher tire, because there's no point in doing the lap on older tires if you're trying to improve. So putting Max Verstappen on a fresher tire would have meant that there had to be one less fresh tires for the race or for Q3. So I get why Red Bull didn't let Max Verstappen go out for another additional improvement lap, but my god, was that such a close call, and I was legit flipping out. Now let's talk about the Q3 crash. It is unlikely to see Max Verstappen crash on his own, okay? He is actually pretty well known for catching these slides, and even under wet weather, he is well known for, keeping the car on track. So in this season, it has happened twice, especially in qualifying, where the car had just went and crashed. And we also have this habit, when Max Verstappen crashes, we never question if it was Max's fault. it is always the car's fault, and it quite happens to be correct this time as well. So when Max Verstappen crashed at turn 9, I think turn 6 itself, he felt something was off with the car and he lost the car a little bit and he kind of kept it in. And we later found out that there was the rear wing flap that opens and closes for straight mode. It had picked up some damage and it did not close properly. So Max did not have the usual downforce that he has in these kind of fast corners. So when he turned in, the car just let go because there was just no rear grip. But Max had put such a strong first lap in Q3 and was on provisional pole, so everyone else was just trying to better it. And with the track evolution, we were gonna see like one lap shootouts for the final grid places, but sadly the crash happened. Thankfully Max was alright and he was starting in P5 in the race. Now let's talk about the beast of an upgrade that Red Bull had brought in, because what was that car pace all of a sudden during the race? Max was on fire figuratively and his car was easily comparable to Mercedes. But I do want to say that Max was getting every little bit off the car, but Toto was also heard saying that he was not able to fully extract the potential of the car because of the reliability issues. So Mercedes are not at their 100%, right? So if Max and Red Bull are at their 100%, they were barely matching the potential that Toto has decided to show with the Mercedes. There is a lot more potential in the Mercedes. That's what the talk is at the moment. So I don't want to overhype this performance of Max and Red Bull, but yes, in Austria, Red Bull's pace was comparable to Mercedes. Max was really fast towards the end. He had better pace than the Mercedes of George, but Kimi had the overall best pace, I think, because Kimi was catching Max faster than Max was catching George. Max had a 13-second gap to Russell and Kimi had a 6 to 7 second gap to Max, but towards the end of the 71 laps, the gap between all three drivers was less than 2 seconds. So Kimi has managed to close a 13 plus 7 second gap to George overall, right? So I definitely think Kimi had the fresher tires and the better pace on the car. He was flying, but I am going to give the Red Bull car a bit of credit because it's not like it was only Max who was extracting everything from the car. Isaac had just started P8 and he finished P6. He was overtaking the Ferraris as well, and both Max and Hadja separately confirmed that the car had potential and they were managing because they were not in the right window throughout the full race. They were in the right window in the beginning, but the car had even better pace if only they were in the right window throughout the race. Max could have even challenged George for the win, but it didn't happen. Max definitely was in a good mood because he was joking on the radio as well. We know when Max is cracking jokes, yeah, he's definitely in a good mood. When Carlos Sainz DNF'd, obviously Max was told that there is a double yellow flag, and Max's response was, so now full throttle just like Russell, and he added I'm joking in the end. So yeah, he's definitely got a bone to pick with Russell. Toto gave Max a hug, and he also added that you can never count out Max Verstappen. But the thing is, we all said the same thing about Lewis last week, and look what happened in this race. So again, let's not jump on the hype train and say Max is back or Red Bull is back. As per Max, Silverstone is going to be a very, very difficult track and weekend. It is an energy-starved circuit apparently. So this benefits a lot of Mercedes engines, and Ferrari and Red Bull are going to have a miserable weekend. But for now, yeah, the greater consensus is that the Red Bull upgrades are broadly in the right direction, and we can see a little more competitive Max Verstappen going forward. Now let's talk about Ferrari. Now, where do we start with this team? I think the perfect place to start is with the memes. The whole week, the whole time, we've been hyping them about ADUO and the upgrades and how Lewis is back and their strategy team has figured out all of that. We were hyping them up, and look what happened. I don't know where that 15 horsepower also went that we were expecting from the engine upgrade. The whole weekend, the car looks just energy starved. We did get a little bit of flashbacks of 2021 Max versus Lewis, but again, that was just quickly overshadowed by the way Red Bull and McLarens were just overtaking Ferrari left, right and center. Ferrari definitely lacked a lot of straight line pace, and it was just getting glaringly obvious. Charles Leclerc was a sitting duck. He couldn't do anything but let people just overtake him. Imagine if it is like this for them in the Red Bull ring, how difficult is it going to be for Silverstone that is coming up? I am genuinely worried for the non-Mercedes cars out there. I won't be even surprised if Alpines did better than Ferrari and Red Bull over there. I do want to talk a little more about Max versus Lewis, that battle that we had, and the drone shots. Oh my god, the drone shots were the highlight of the race telecast because it was absolute cinema. And to be honest, those drone shots and the Max versus Lewis battle was the highlight of the race, because the rest of the race just happened in the pit stops and the strategies. There was no on-track wheel-to-wheel going on for a long time. And I love how Lewis already knew how to use Max's own tricks against him. He shut the door, he pushed him off and put him in the gravel, and Max was calling for a penalty for that move, lol. Funny guy. But this was a battle Ferrari was eventually going to lose anyway, because even though it is Hamilton who was on the wheel, there was just power deficiency which was glaring. Max was at some point bound to pass. Last week they were the king of strategies, and this week they just look like clowns. Lewis also admitted that the 3-stop was his idea, but they didn't start on the softs, because last race the 3-stop worked because Lewis started on the softs. The 3-stop strategy works only if you start the race on softs and then you build a gap, you make the overtakes on the soft tires against people who are on an inferior tire. While Lewis overtook Charles Leclerc in the opening lap, again it was a Ferrari, he was energy stout, he was easily overtaken again by Max, and the fact that Ferrari pitted early and Red Bull did not fall for the bait, yes, it kinda ruined that entire strategy for Ferrari. Max continued for another 6 or 7 more laps before they pitted him, so Max's fight was always with P1 and not with the Ferraris. Max was definitely aiming for the race win. So even a 3-stopper could not do anything about the overall pace. I am genuinely questioning the ADUO upgrades because it basically did nothing at this point. But again, we made fun of the Ferrari update earlier, and in Barcelona when the full upgrade came in, the car looked a little more rounded and polished. So maybe this is a partial upgrade. We are hearing rumors that Monza is going to be the next big upgrade for them. So we will see the true potential of the Ferrari then. But yes, folks, we are back to our regularly scheduled programming. It was fun while it lasted. We had a lovely glow up after Barcelona. The world looked like a better place after Lewis's win. But now we are back to business as usual. Oh, before I forget, George also crossed Lewis back to being P2 in the championship standings. Okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the big talking point of the weekend, the reason why Ferrari fumbled and why the race turned out to be the way it is, the thing that is going to trigger so many conversations about the marshals and the role of yellow flags and double yellow flags. Carlos Sainz's DNF. I'm kidding. Let's talk about George Russell's pole lap and the controversial yellow flag decision that ensured Russell got the pole and kept it, and all the safety concerns that came with it. First of all, what are the rules? When we know and understand the rules, it kind of helps us understand the decision-making process, and it just helps us avoid any confusions. The yellow flag is waved when there is an abnormality or an incident on the track and the marshals are figuring out what is happening. Basically, it happens when someone's gone off the track or suddenly they've gone into the gravel and you see a lot of smoke, but you're not sure if the car is safe or is it stuck. Or let us say there is something on the track, there is a bit of oil, or there is some animal crossing the track, and then you don't know, you don't want to put on the brakes on the session, you don't want to stop the session, you are just investigating. That's when you put a yellow flag. Double yellow flag is when the abnormality is pretty obvious, the incident is pretty obvious, and you know for sure this is going to get investigated or something needs to be done because it is kind of unsafe, and that's when you put a double yellow flag. Under single yellow flags, the drivers are supposed to be cautious, they were supposed to slightly slow down, they are also expected to be ready to change directions if needed. Like for example, something is on the track, you have to swerve and change direction, right? So you're supposed to be cautious. Under double yellows, the driver should significantly drop his speed, but then the same rules as single yellow flag applies, you have to be ready to switch directions. Now all the speeds of the cars are monitored, but the slowdown measurement is subjective. Why, you may ask? Why doesn't the FIA have like absolute unit drops? Like for example, you have to reduce by 50 kph or even like a percentage of the speed drops. See, this is because yellow flags can happen at any part of the track, including like the pit exit and pit lane entrance and stuff like that, and different parts of the track will have different speeds, right? So you cannot standardize situation. See, sometimes yellow flags can also be caused due to a crash versus an animal crossing the track, right? You cannot standardize this, so that's why yellow flags are very subjective, especially the speeds. So now let's come back to what happened in Q3. Max crashed. We all know that. We all know what happened. We all know why it happened also. We spoke about in the earlier part of the video. My big question, and pretty much everyone's big question, is that a crash that big guarantees a double yellow from the start. Max spun into the gravel. There is a lot of smoke and dust because gravel is up on the air, right? Up in the air. He has effectively slammed against the wall, which means the wall also needs to be inspected and repaired. It has happened in turn 9, which is a high speed section. There is a chance that if, let us say, Max had spun because there was oil on track, chances are there is another car that's going to come full speed in that exact part of the session that is also going to spin and hit Max Verstappen exactly where he is parked right now. Now, Max has to also get out of a crashed car because you never know if there is any fire or any other safety hazard, and the stewards and the marshals have so many vantage points. They have so many cameras. The marshals are looking at the crash right next to them happening. So why is it not a double yellow? I just will never understand. There is a video of Kimi Antonelli talking to Bono in the briefing room about why Kimi assumed that it was a double yellow and he went ahead. Why is Kimi making that statement? Because Kimi was following Max Verstappen, and when you see a crash like that, in these circumstances, it is always obviously a double yellow flag. So Kimi was apologizing for not seeing the single yellow because his muscle memory and his experience shows that even though his experience is little, in such scenarios, it is usually the double yellow that comes up first. And Toto was also seen saying that he's a teenager and how was he supposed to know? And that's the thing. For the sake of the safety, the teenager did the right thing. George Russell knew the rule book. He saw a single yellow. He claimed that he didn't see Verstappen. He lifted off just 1 second before the turn 9 and he claimed he didn't see Max Verstappen. He floored it because yes, after that sector there was green flag and he got pole anyway. See, now I'm not going to be harsh on George Russell for doing it because he did not break any rules. He used the rules to his advantage. That is not a problem at all. I am going to question the safety team. I am going to question the marshals and I am going to question the stewards. Even if we believe George didn't see Max had crashed, that makes it even worse. Why? Max has crashed in a space where the visibility was really poor. That's why George couldn't see. So that makes it even more dangerous. These are the kind of mistakes that are usually controversial in my opinion. See, in this sport, you can bend the rules to help your agenda. You can play politics. You can do all of this to stay competitive. I don't care. It's a sport. People come and go. People do all of these things to get an advantage. That is fine. But this kind of safety issues is where I genuinely will put my foot down and question, because I did the same thing in Japan when the regulations put Ollie Bearman in danger and in his crash. The yellow flag came out and 15 seconds later it became a double yellow flag. What is with this relaxed way of updating the flag? There is a man who is in danger. The red flag never came out because the session had already hit 0000. So I don't think red flag would have made any difference because everybody had aborted their lap and they have to go to the pits anyway. But in the end of the day, George Russell got pole, and now I think is a good time to talk about that Mercedes pace. And the fact that Kimi finished behind George in P4 kinda decided the strategies for both these drivers, and they were always going to be very different, especially because they were not racing each other. And even with all these upgrades from the other teams, Mercedes are still the team to beat. George pretty much drove a very clean race. His race pace was definitely not the best. In fact, Verstappen and Kimi were catching him by the end. His pace was just enough to hold these two guys back till lap 71. Hats off to George, drove a focused, clean race through the weekend, finding the little moments where he can show his craftiness. He took the pole away from his teammate. It feels weird to say this, but it is just the second win for George Russell this season for how dominant Mercedes has been. He overtakes Lewis also to retain the second spot in the championship points table. He still has a 40 points gap to Kimi. Kimi, in essence, had P2 in his sights. That's where he could have potentially finished if there was just extra one lap. But the weekend was a redemption day for both George Russell and Red Bull in their home race after 2 years of not having a Red Bull driver on the podium. Overall, I do want to say this has been a decent weekend for the fans. There was no wheel-to-wheel racing like what we see on Canada for the first 20 or 30 laps. George and Kimi were just fighting it out. We did not see that many racing back and forths. Pretty much all the big decisions were made in strategies in the pit stops, and definitely for the bigger picture there were some significant swings in moods and expectations. Weirdly, most of the other teams just had a race that was under the radar. There were some passes and repasses. McLaren had a decent fight among themselves, and Oscar drove a very comfortable P4. Kimi had a lap 1 incident where he had to give the place back because he overtook off the track, and that was when Max also took advantage and overtook Kimi. Hadjar had some decent passes on the Ferrari and McLaren. Racing Bulls, both these drivers were in the top 10 just like I wanted, and that brings me to the predictions that I made in my weekend review video. Let's see how I did in my predictions. Here is what I predicted in the beginning of the weekend. First prediction, Max wins. Red Bull will throw a spanner in the plans of Ferrari and Mercedes. Well, partially true, partially didn't happen. It almost happened. Ferrari definitely were ruined. Mercedes were still the big dogs to beat, and Max didn't win, but he came close. P2. Second prediction, Ferrari will have only one driver in the top 5. They are still Ferrari. Nailed this prediction. Ferrari barely managed to get one person in P5. Lewis somehow, even with that 3-stop strategy, managed to only get P5. Leclerc, I think, will have booked his appointment with the therapist already. Third prediction, Mercedes will look good in qualifying and will be on the podium. Yes, definitely Mercedes looked good in qualifying and they were on the podium. Fourth prediction, Williams double DNF. Half correct. Sainz DNF serves him right for talking all that rubbish last week. And fifth predictions, Racing Bulls double points. Nailed it. The boys are on a roll. So I got 3 out of the 5 predictions right. Not bad. And the 2 that I didn't even get correct were partially right. So yeah, not bad at all. Folks, there are so many things left to discuss. Strategies, if somebody was on a different strategy, would they have gotten onto the podium? If Lewis had stuck to a 2-stop, will he have been on the podium? If Kimi pitted 1 lap late under the VSC, would it have made any difference? We will discuss all of that in the Q&A and the race analysis video that will be out next. So thank you so much for watching, guys. This week is going to be an exciting, busy week because by the time we even finish discussing about Austria, Silverstone is right up ahead the weekend, so it's already race week. So more videos incoming. Stay subscribed, stay tuned, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.